Problem behavior in children is a symptom of a dysfunctional context. Now, this I can't emphasize more. It isn't due to the kid's genes. It isn't due to the family upbringing. It is due to the context within which the child lives. Now, I've said this very categorically, and obviously I can just simply tell you everything blurs over into everything. Genes are important, family is important. I'm an analyst, for God's sake. Naturally, I know families are important and early childhood is important. What we're saying here is forget about all that and just look at what you've got in front of you in the school. As people mentioned, you cannot be a therapist to the kids. You cannot be a parent to the kids. What you can be is a manager of the social context. And this program is this approach. I wish I could get rid of, in my mind, the term program. I don't mean program. This approach gives you a set of tools to modify the context of the school. Why are we interested in that? Frank and I met up research-wise in 1990 with an intervention in a Jamaican city. Jamaica has the third highest homicide rate in the world. And we intervened with an immensely corrupt police force with a huge homicide rate in a city that no longer had tourists in it because they were too afraid to go there. We worked for a 3 to 5 year period, changing how the city functioned, and out of that we learned the central role of schools in community violence. And I want to put this idea in your head. It's not original, but it's very interesting. If you want a peaceful Australia, you need to have peaceful schools. The opportunity for schools to become the training ground for peaceful Australian citizens is unrealized. When you are creating a peaceful school as teachers and psychologists, you're also creating the potential for a peaceful city and a peaceful country. Modifying external behavior, for example, giving a kid 9 ways of handling bullies, which we do. We haven't actually covered them very much here, and we will in the next 2 days, starting tomorrow and continuing on Saturday. A group of you are going to undergo training. But there's a great number of different ways of managing bullies that don't involve teachers, but could involve all sorts of interesting things, like acting really weird, cracking a joke, befriending the bully. There's a lot of fascinating behaviors you can modify, but if you modify the external behavior, it will not solve the problem. It may ameliorate it. So the 2 boys who were bullying each other will not bully each other. However, 5 minutes later, there will be another 6 boys bullying each other. So you'll do your magic again, and then 5 minutes later, there'll be another 6 boys bullying each other. And then after you've been teaching for about 5 years, you will say, I don't think this program works. We are talking about universal prevention. For the oldies here, primary prevention. In other words, this is what you do to prevent bullying and violence becoming a problem in your school. It is not identifying at-risk kids. It is not managing a collapsed system. In a very basic way, I'm going to describe power dynamics in a minute. When a school is high in power dynamics and low in mentalization, as far as I can understand the Australian use of the concept of well-being, that school will be low in well-being. It will be a school in which children won't learn because they will be too upset and anxious. It will be a school where children won't want to go, and when they go there, they'll want to leave. And out of this has come a uniting issue around humiliation. Humiliation is a shaming process in which a person is publicly asked to display their weaknesses to a laughing audience. I don't know if any of you were bullied as kids, were you? Come on. There's at least 20% of this room are lying. I was bullied at school. So humiliation is a critical issue you need to keep a close eye on in schools. I don't necessarily mean you need to measure it with a test, but you need to be aware that it is immensely important, especially in adolescents, but in all children. We also found that there are natural leaders. I'll go into that in a minute. These aren't necessarily children or adults. They aren't necessarily teachers. In one school it was a janitor. In another school it was one of the women who patrolled the roads when children crossed to come and go from school. In another it was a volunteer. In many schools it can be children and teachers. Frequently librarians and music teachers that see all the kids are natural leaders. What is a natural leader? I'll answer that in a minute. What they actually do is help the school become high in well-being. Once the natural leader gets into gear, and what's happened up to now is you haven't spent a single dime on anything. Nothing at all. This has cost you nothing, except reflection. Once that gets going, power dynamics come back under control, and I'll explain that in a minute, and mentalization can be released in the system. So when you have a low power dynamic, high mentalization social system, you have high well-being. When you have high well-being, we found in one study we were able to track children around a whole school system. So when they would move from one school to the other, we took their academic performance, which was standardized. And what we found was that children who spend 2 years in a high well-being school carry it with them. It's a solid part of what they actually take. They keep it unconsciously, and they practice it even in schools that are not high in well-being. When you look at the behavioral approach, behavior shaping, which underpins, I would say, 99% of all anti-bullying programs that we've seen, we've looked in fair detail at the ones that are best supported statistically. If you focus on behavior, your focus is narrow, and it remains to be on the victim of bullying and the victimizer, the bully. The individual's role is seen as fixed, and the audience is passive. We call the audience bystanders. The definition of behavior is purely external. It's by what you do, not what you're thinking. And these roles are focused on, and the intervention targets the two individuals involved in the process. Make sense? Yeah, it makes good sense. The only problem is it doesn't work. Nobody has solved this problem in spite of the best efforts. So the question we had after that was, maybe the question is framed incorrectly. It isn't modifying behavior, it's modifying how the social system functions. The bully is not a person, the bully is a process. When you take a child who is bullying, you're taking an individual who contains the rage of the system. In other words, the bully is an agent of the system, and the victim is his target. So if you only manage the bully and the victim, you don't stop where the problem begins, which is in how the social program is functioning. And I'm going to go into that in more detail. On this side, the psychoanalytic look at it basically tells you that the bully-victim-bystander roles are complex and unconscious. And the word unconscious I want you to keep in mind, just keep in mind as an idea at this point. You focus then not on the individual, but on the climate of the school. Climate, like in meteorology, is the atmosphere of the school. When mentalizing collapses, what will you see in a school? Now, I'm going to tell you what you'll see, and you'll recognize it. You can't, it's hard to translate it from experience into thinking. What you will see is reactive, mindless action. Kids who simply are out of control. It's probably the term you use to describe them. What they are like, have you seen those movies, The Night of the Living Dead? They're like the zombies bashing into each other mindlessly. Envy and greed become very common in that context. Schools break into cliques, are often around culture figures like singers, sometimes around drugs, sometimes around actions, but the school becomes a set of little cliques without a proper cohesion. These groups are primarily self-interested. So what's missing from this program so far? What do you see as not there? Does it stand out? Any sort of connection, altruistic connection. In a dysfunctional, collapsed school, there is no feeling of being connected with each other at all. And that includes teachers. That's why teachers don't like those sort of schools. They don't want to come there. They want to leave. They have a lot of mental health days. They have a lot of illnesses. They want to get home from school as quickly as possible. The mentality of a bully school is us versus them. The mentality of a functional school, high well-being school, is us, no them. At this point, let me just shift next. I want to say something about power dynamics. When mentalizing collapses, unconscious social roles in the system drive behavior. You can't have a victim without a victimizer, right? Here is a couple of statements about natural and I call it narcissistic leaders. This is why you need to find them. These people do not volunteer when you say, who wants to be president of the class? You'll get an automatic, who wants to be on the school council, student council? The kids that put up their hands aren't the kids you want. The people you want are the ones that function in the service of the group, not for personal reward, not for medals, not for certificates, but for the good of the group. It's not possible to think of a school separate from its community. They mirror each other. That's why a peaceful school will reflect in a peaceful community, if you're lucky. The second point is you start as early as possible. And the professor this morning has got a grade 3 start. I think that's far too late. And I'll probably communicate with him about that. But I think pre-K is where you should start, usually about 3 or 4 years of age. At age 4, for sure, and possibly 3, children can be trained to mentalize. The other issue is the parent-teacher connection must be very strong. That means parents must do something other than make cupcakes and raise money for schools. They have to be involved in the teaching process. For example, we have a pediatrician who's laid out a beautiful module in child rearing for teachers to know. So it will help them a little in managing a child. So the idea of the parents is a myth. Those parents may have enormously important skills for helping your school become high in well-being.